The Minnesota Vikings made a draft trade that kind of feels like it's pointed at another draft trade, doesn't it? Let's get into it. It's Locked On Vikings.
You are Locked On Vikings, your daily Minnesota Vikings podcast, part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the Locked On Vikings podcast, where we're always trying to learn something new. It's part of the Locked On Podcast Network, your team every day. And thank you so much to those of you who hang out and listen every single day. Got a very fun treat for you in store today, talking to Locked On Texans about the draft trade the Vikings just did with the Texans, not to mention Jonathan Greenard, Blake Cashman, a little Danielle Hunter talk and all that. So we will get into that. But hey, if you are new here, this is something that the Locked On Podcast Network can do. Your team every day, right? And we do crossovers every Thursday in season as well. But for now, hello, my name is Luke. You can find me wherever you find your favorite podcasts, whether it is a podcast listening app like the SiriusXM app, or YouTube, or Amazon Fire and Roku if you download the Locked On Minnesota Sports app. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. So, the Vikings did a thing, huh? They traded to the Houston Texans their second rounder this year, their second rounder next year, and they did a 6-7 swap. So they gave up a 6 and got a 7 back. In return for all that, they get pick number 23. They get a first round pick. If you look at that on the trade charts, and there's a great trade chart calculator that puts together all of the different trade charts that have been made over the years from the original Jimmy Johnson one. This is the first time we talked about the trade chart, by the way. I should probably explain them. They just assign a value to every draft pick. So if you trade the first pick for the 10th pick, you've lost some value, right? And whatever that difference is, you hope that whatever you got back in return is made up, and you can kind of use that to compare and see who got a good deal or not, right? So by basically all of these, pretty unanimous, the Vikings did not get a good deal out of that. To make that deal truly fair, the Texans would have had to send another entire third rounder back. Then it would have been about even money. But that is sort of to be expected. When you're doing this for a quarterback, teams know, right? And nobody in their right, even if they kept Kirk Cousins, nobody in their right mind would have been like, you're just doing this for fun, huh? They always were going to know. So it's not like that's a market that you can control. So this is the world we're going to live in. We're probably going to have to overpay if we're going to try to get up to 3, 4, or 5. But that seems to be where this is aimed at. Did the Vikings just start trading up for Drake Maye? That's what's in everybody's head right now, right? And why is it Drake Maye? I thought he was the second quarterback, right? Maybe not. It is basically out of the bat. It's Caleb Williams, number 1, right? Everybody knows that. So Caleb Williams, number 1, you can pencil that in. At number 2, you got the Washington Commanders, and everybody's really convinced that that's Jayden Daniels. Now, I don't know how much of that is reporting, hey, they are going to take Jayden Daniels, my source told me, or if it's speculating, which there's a lot of reasons to speculate that. Cliff Kingsbury, Arizona State, you've got that connection. You've got that air raid familiarity. Jayden Daniels' skill set is very well suited for the Cliff Kingsbury offense, where you do have the quarterback running some options sometimes, or what he ran with Kyler Murray. Not only that, but then some of the spread out stuff he can execute. He can think through that, I think, quickly enough, if not close. So it makes a lot of sense for it to be Jayden Daniels. Then you get to New England, where the draft really starts. And this is where all eyes are going to be now. All eyes were on Chicago. Chicago traded Justin Fields away, which, by the way, they're probably going to get less draft compensation than the Vikings will for Kirk Cousins in compensatory picks. So it depends on how the pick formula changes out. That might still cancel. But if the Vikes get a compensatory third and the Bears got a 6th, oops. But I digress. So all eyes now will be on New England. Now the Bears, it's Caleb Williams. They traded Justin Fields, we all know. And now it's all on New England. The chalk move is New England takes Drake Maye. And they say, oh my goodness, Drake Maye fell to us. We're all very excited about Drake Maye. Great. Arizona probably takes Marvin Harrison. I actually just went on Locked On Cardinals to talk about the possibility of trading up with Arizona. If you're interested in that, go check out Locked On AZ Cardinals. And Then at 5, you've got the Chargers, who are very interested in a trade down, everybody is reporting. And then the Giants are at 6. This is, I think, the window of the draft we're looking at, right? I don't think the Vikings bother to trade up behind the Giants because there are rumors that the Giants have like buyer's remorse with Daniel Jones, and now they got Drew Lock, and they've got this competition that they're not even excited about. Maybe they're going to take a quarterback, so maybe they'll try to trade up or something like that. So you got to leapfrog the Giants, I guess, to feel good. But I think if you want Drake Maye, you got to get up to 3 because if the Patriots don't do it, somebody else will, right? The Raiders, they're going to try to trade up. The Broncos might try, but they're still kind of hamstrung by the Russell Wilson trade. So it's a little bit tougher for them to get that. They would have to like start putting players in it or something, which they can. That's possible, but they're swimming upstream a little bit. And then there's the Vikings, who now are clearly in the best position to make that deal work. They have a lot more ammo now, and this was true last year when they didn't have more ammo, they're the most willing team. And they got really close to pulling a huge upset in that draft trade instead of Houston trading up for Will Anderson. They got way closer than you think to trading up to 3 and getting Anthony Richardson. The question is, does New England want to do this? Like, do they feel this, right? And that's going to be the thing we speculate about for 6 weeks. Until we're really bored of speculating about it, or until a trade happens before the draft, which is very much possible. But the rumor is, and this is very much just rumor, very susceptible to being a smokescreen, but I'll tell you about it anyways, and you decide how much you want to believe it, is that they don't really like Drake Maye that much, and they don't really like J.J. McCarthy that much. So once Jaden Daniels is off the board and Caleb Williams is off the board, they're going to go, we don't like those two guys, and our roster is in a really rough spot. Like if you look at that New England roster, they got nothing. They are very barren. So trading back and accumulating a bunch of draft picks for them and essentially going into this like supercharged rebuild is a pretty attractive option once you decide that you don't like the quarterbacks that you're into. And the Vikings, I think, have been pushing that hard. They have been asking, according to Darren Wolfson of KSTP at least, they've been asking about this since the Senior Bowl. And I think the La Reveal Magnifico, to borrow a phrase from around the NFL, is that the Vikings did this Texans trade. I don't think this is not an efficient trade. This is a costly move for the Vikings in terms of like you are not turning a profit here. And for somebody like Kwesi, who's so value oriented, who's so determined and he talks about it in pressers, like he is determined for every single transaction to turn a profit. To do something as unprofitable as this, I don't think you do that because you think you're coming ahead in draft capital, right? You do that because you're aiming at trading up in the draft. And I don't think that you take this step is kind of a no going back moment, right? They are trading up. You may go to bed after pick 6 in the draft, and you probably don't have to wake up on Friday either. And I don't think that they do that unless they know enough about how the draft is going. Unless they know that Jaden Daniels isn't going to like accidentally fall to the Patriots and then they're going to take him. And then they know that somebody between New England and Arizona and the Chargers, and there's been reports of all 3 of those teams taking calls for a trade up. And the Vikings are one of them. They know that one of those 3 teams is going to say yes, assuming the board falls a certain way, and they know the board will fall that way. That they are reading the rumor mill and saying with confidence, this is going to happen. And I think the question now is, do they trade up to 3 and take Drake Maye? Do they trade up to 3 and take J.J. McCarthy, which is something that has actually been rumored, which would be a pretty surprising outcome? Or do the Patriots say, nope, we're taking Drake Maye, and then the Vikings trade up with like the Chargers to 5 and take J.J. McCarthy there, with the Cardinals taking like Marvin Harrison or whatever, just staying put at 4. Those are the options now. Those are the outcomes, and you can choose how you like those outcomes. I think the big argument with McCarthy is everybody's going to say, what do you mean him at 5? He's a guy that should go in like 20. He ain't going at 20. Get over it. It's over. He's going top 5 probably. He's probably going like either somebody leapfrogs the Giants, or I think if he gets past the Giants, then I can see him start to fall to like the Denver Vegas range. And then somebody's going to probably come up to either leapfrog those guys or he just gets taken by one of those guys. but I don't think he's getting past. I would be stunned if he got past 12. I guess that's where I'm at on that. So we got a lot of time to think about this. So we're going to think about this a little more. But now I would like to transition into talking a little bit about that trade and about the Texans free agents the Vikings have in Jonathan Greenard and Blake Cashman, and of course Danielle Hunter going the other way. So we did a little impromptu crossover with Locked On Texans. So that is coming up next. Today's episode of Locked On Vikings is brought to you by Robinhood. Did you know that even if you have a 401k for retirement, you can still have an IRA? Robinhood has the only IRA that gives you a 3% boost on every dollar you contribute when you subscribe to Robinhood Gold. But get this, now through April 30th, Robinhood is even boosting every single dollar you transfer in from other retirement accounts with a 3% match. That's right, no cap on the 3% match. Robinhood Gold gets you the most for your retirement thanks to their IRA with a 3% match. This offer is good through April 30th. Get started at Robinhood.com/boost. Subscription fees apply. And for some legal info, claim of Q1 2024 validated by Radius Global Market Research. Investing involves risk, including loss. Limitations apply to IRAs and 401ks. 3% match requires Robinhood Gold for 1 year from the date of the first 3% match. Must keep Robinhood IRA for 5 years. The 3% matching on transfers is subject to specific terms and conditions. Robinhood IRA available to U.S. customers in good standing. Robinhood Financial LLC, member SIPC, is a registered broker-dealer. All right, moving into a crossover moment here. Locked On Vikings, Locked On Texans. We kind of had to do this because we keep doing things together.
Yeah.
We're swapping edge rushers. We're swapping draft picks. We got a linebacker from Houston. We got a lot to talk about. But I think the thing that Texans fans are going to want to hear the most about is Danielle Hunter. Kind of the marquee signing over there. And then Jonathan Greenard comes over to Minnesota. So the thing people probably want to hear is, okay, how do these two players compare to each other? The Vikings are paying a little bit less. They're paying about $19 million a year as opposed to, I think it's $24.5 million a year for Danielle Hunter. And Danielle Hunter's contract is like almost fully guaranteed, whereas Greenard's has a much more standard structure.
Right.
4 years, $76 million, about half of it's guaranteed. Well, we don't actually know the details of the contract structure and if it's like how backloaded it is or whatever, but that's going to probably be something a little more normal for the Vikings. So I guess we've got to figure out exactly which we just have to compare these two guys, right? So what do you think in terms of how Danielle Hunter and Jonathan Greenard compare? Here with John Hickman of Locked On Texans, and I'm Luke Braun. I do Locked On Vikings.
I think for Greenard, I can't really talk about Hunter. Like, I know he's a premier pass rusher when healthy. I know that he's an impactful player, setting that edge, being able to get after the quarterback, set the edge against the run. And I think for Greenard, when healthy, he's the same. Honestly, he's not that tier of a player, I would say Danielle Hunter is. But what I saw from Greenard this past year, which is why I really wanted him back to Houston compared to maybe like a Dalton Schultz who Houston retained, was when he was on the field, you saw a player who became a much better pass rusher compared to when he first came out of Florida. Became much better at stopping the run compared to when he came out of Florida and got more comfortable also because the pieces around him were also much more consistent as well. So you saw him be able to be a dominant player for that Texans D-line or defensive front because Sheldon Rankins had a good year. Malik Collins had a good year. On the opposite side, Will Anderson had a good year. So he was one of those pieces in the puzzle that did his part. And because of that, because of everybody else, his part was huge for this team to be able to get, career franchise record of 46 sacks. Mind you, J.J. Watt had 2 20-sack seasons in Houston, but because of everybody else on that defensive front seven, because we'll talk about Blake Cashman and his impact, you saw Greenard really be able to have a career year. And I think with you guys, I don't know if you have a player on the opposite side or a player in the middle that could be, dominate a game or two. But
not really. Greenard's like the guy. Like he's coming in to be like the focal point dude.
Right. And that may be a worry, but I really do like Greenard. I mean, and I think for me, the biggest reason why I like Greenard as a football player is when healthy, asterisk around that, of course.
Okay.
the multitude of ways of getting after a quarterback. There's no limitations on how he can get after a quarterback. You'll see him in middle of the game, kind of like, okay, I messed up on this play, and they were able to run right past me. Now I need to truly set the edge and make a play. So he makes in-game adjustments on his own. I like Greenard. I think you guys are getting a very good football player. Again, you may end up missing Hunter because the question mark around Greenard will always be when healthy. But when he is on that field, and you guys have to draft help, you're going to get an impactful player.
It's interesting because there's this injury concern with Hunter as well, in that, so he missed like 2 years in a row, most of 2 years in a row. One of them was a pec injury. That kind of thing doesn't tend to sustain. That you miss your time and then you get your operation, then it heals and it's over. But the neck thing that he had, so he had a herniated disc in his neck back in 2020. That's the JJ Watt injury. So there's always going to be that little background concern, but he has proven now 2 years in a row that he can play a full season. So it's no more than like a little background voice in your head that might be saying, oh, yeah, maybe he gets hurt this year. Like there's this 5% chance.
Beware.
But what he is, but what he is everything. He does everything. This is what Danielle Hunter does. He's a totally freakish athlete. If you see a picture of this guy, you're like, my goodness, how are you a human? But he's like, the reason he wears 99 is because he's a creative player. Like that's people in Minnesota forever called him like a Madden creative player. Because it was every slider maxed out. He's, long, he bends, he's strong, he's fast, he's explosive. He's got he ticks every single box. If you want him to be a guy that, smartly, patiently contain rushes against a mobile quarterback, he's got you. If you need him to just set up a right tackle all day long and then, wait for a big third down to get that sack, he's got you. And like he comes into his own big time on third downs in particular. He is like the king of the third down drive killer sack in a huge moment. And that's actually by design. That's something that Mike Zimmer had him doing for years in Minnesota. And I don't know what DeMeco Ryans does with his edge rushers if he moves guys around the formation so much, but Mike Zimmer would not. He would say, no, you're going up against this dude all day long and you're going to set him up, with speed to power all day long. And you're just going to run that on him. And he's going to think that you got him. And then you're going to hit him with a spin move on a third down that they do not see coming at all. And you're going to get that. And so he's got this like situational awareness to like pick a really extraordinary moment in the game to like unleash the counter punch that absolutely will get a sack that he's been setting up all day. And that's why a lot of his production skews into third down. Third downs are easier for edge rushers anyways. But like more than other edge rushers, his production skews into third down, like very much on purpose. And this led to playoff wins for the Vikings. And like the only concern here is that he's going to be 30 this year. So do you start seeing athletic decline? Which man, the dude is one of the biggest athletic outliers I've ever seen. I'm not sure if I'm like following the classic patterns with him is the expectation. I love the dude. You guys got to see.
I also think that's a good thing for you guys with Greenard. He's only 26. He'll be.
I think that's part of the reason. Yeah.
Yeah.
So what about Blake Cashman real quick? Can you tell me exactly what the Vikings got in this guy? Former Gopher. A lot of Minnesotans are very familiar.
Yeah. A very good linebacking coverage. That's what I got. He's a guy that is a very good tackler. Don't have a lot of missed tackles. You hear a lot of people say this, and it's very true for Cashman, but he does his job. Like he's in his assignments. He's making plays, and you guys, you're really going to love him in coverage. My only worry with that is before this year, Cashman didn't necessarily play starter snaps, right? He wasn't necessarily a full-time starter throughout his career. I know he had another season, I think, with the Jets where he got a good amount of snaps, but this was his career year, and he stepped into his role because of the lack of how can I put this? The lack of trust with the linebacker core throughout the year. At one point, Houston couldn't trust Christian Harris for the first half of the season. The second half of the season, he turned up and was clearly the Texans' best linebacker. You can't necessarily trust Perriman in passing situations, and so you have to take him out on third and second downs at time. And so with Cashman, they trusted him the most to be able to drop back in coverage and make plays, and that's what he was able to do. And he was also very good at just, again, and his assignments. He's good against the run as well. So I think you guys are going to get a player that is a solid player, maybe played over his expectations this year. And I do want you guys to keep that in mind. But overall, there's no complaints for me with Cashman. I thought he was a very good football player.
All right. So the thing that I think Vikings fans want to talk the most about, and I have some curiosities too with what you guys are going to do, is the draft trade. Vikings now hold pick 11 and 23. So we are going to talk about that next. Back with John in just a second. Today's episode is brought to you by Gametime, which is the best place to get last-minute tickets to any event. Whether it is a Timberwolves game, you got to get in and see one of those if you live in Minnesota, right, this year, or a Wild game, which maybe you can find those deals even last minute, even up to an hour into the event on Gametime. It's the only ticketing app that gives you complete peace of mind with your purchase. All of their prices are the total upfront, so there's no hidden fees. Everything. You know you're getting exactly the deal that you're getting before you check out. And you can buy tickets in 2 seconds with just 2 taps. And the Gametime guarantee means you'll always get the best price. If you find tickets in the same section and row for less, Gametime will credit you 110% of the difference. Take the guesswork out of buying tickets with Gametime. Download the Gametime app, create an account, and use code LOCKEDON for $20 off your first purchase. Terms apply. Again, create an account and redeem code LOCKEDON for $20 off. Download Gametime today. Last minute tickets, lowest price guaranteed. Keeping it rolling here with an impromptu crossover here on the Locked On Podcast Network. I'm Luke Braun. I do Locked On Vikings here with John Hickman, who does Locked On Texans. Just talked about some of the free agent swaps that we've had between these two teams. And now there's draft pick swaps. So here is the trade. The Vikings send Houston pick number 20 or they send Houston a second round pick this year and a second round pick next year. And they do a little 6-7 swap.
Yeah.
For that's it's something. For pick number 23 coming back. So the Vikings are doing this. I'm sure you all can piece this together. The Vikings are clearly aiming at a quarterback. Everybody knows it. They're going to trade up to pick 3, 4, or 5 and pick whatever quarterback that is. Drake Maye, JJ McCarthy, probably one of those, it sounds like. Maybe Jaden Daniels if the Commanders have been really good at smoke screens this year. But that's where we're at. And on my show, I spent the whole first part of the show on it. But why are the Texans willing to do this kind of thing? To me, it kind of looks like the Texans divisional round appearance, exciting rookie quarterback, signing guys like Danielle Hunter. They're trying to, I think they're walking into 2024 saying we're ready to contend here. So how does that fit into that plan to trade 23, pick 23 for 2 second round picks? Do you think that helps that plan?
So my thoughts are, for one, I thought I'm not going to say fleeced, but I definitely think they could have gotten more from Minnesota for that.
You think so? Because all the charts say that the Texans came out like way ahead, which makes sense because it's quarterback stuff. Like there is kind of an extra premium on that, but all the charts said the Texans came out like about like if they sent a third rounder back, it would have been fair. That's like what the trade charts say.
The reason why I say I think they could have gotten more out of that is because you're helping a team potentially go find their franchise quarterback, and we know how valuable that is in the NFL. So you kind of got to make them work a little bit, honestly. Like, shake it a little bit. Don't just come in here and think you're gonna get some free money. I need you to work. But I think for Houston,
we gave you Hunter. Be nice.
I think for Houston, 2 things. They probably view players from 23 to now 42 in the same range, right? And I think if you see Houston maybe at pick 20, that trade maybe don't go down because at pick 20 you still have an opportunity to get one of the premier quarterbacks. And personally, I believe that you could have got him at 23 because of the amount of receivers that are going to be taken in this draft. The receivers and quarterbacks alone are going to push other positions down. But do they make the trade at 20? I don't think so. But with 23 to 42 now, they may look at a group of players that they say, well, we like this guy, we like this guy. We like a handful of players that will be available between 23 and 42. And some of those players at 23 may be available at 42. Some of those players that we think we grade them at 30 may be available at 32. So I do
really
think
somebody, yeah.
Somebody's going to be available at 32. I mean, at 42, excuse me, that they really like. They grade around that area, and they may feel like that it makes more sense to get more out of that pick. Now you got 2 second rounders. I still would have kept the first, honestly. But you also may, for Houston, look at avoiding paying the first round money for a rookie quarterback. I mean, for a rookie, first round rookie for their contract. So that goes into it. And I also think to myself, we just saw Keenan Allen go for a 4th rounder. So I think for Houston, who has addressed the D-line position, right, Danielle Hunter, they have addressed the running back position, right, Joe Mixon, right? They have addressed the amount of holes that they had to fill on this roster because they had over 20 free agents. So you're not going to be swinging out of the park and getting tier 1 signings throughout the entire free agent.
Right. You just have too many things to.
Got too many holes to fill. So once that Keenan Allen deal went down, which we later found out that Houston was definitely in the mix, it didn't fall through for them in their favor. I also think for Houston, it was important for them to get some insurance and say, well, we can get a 2nd rounder and maybe use a 3rd or 4th to trade for a wide receiver because they have yet to address adding weapons for CJ Stroud, who had a phenomenal rookie year, no doubt about it. But in that rookie year, Tank Dell didn't finish the year because of injury, and he was tearing it up here in Houston before that. Nico Collins was your sole receiver that you could trust for the last 5 weeks of the season going into the playoffs. You cannot have that again. And from what I've been told behind scenes, Houston is still definitely doing their research on the wide receiver market. Now, I don't know what's going on with Stephon Diggs and his cryptic tweets on Twitter. I mean, we know how.
Oh my God, that would be so sick.
That would be amazing, right?
2 second rounders to the Bills. Just send them. Stephon Diggs.
2 of them?
Well, so the Vikings got a 1st rounder and then some for Diggs a few years ago. So that's my frame of reference.
I don't think Diggs is worth 2 second rounders. And I would be disappointed if Houston sent over 2 second rounders, knowing that you still need to address your defensive line position. You lost out on Malik Collins. You lost out on Sheldon Rankins. You did bring in Tim Settle. So now you got Will Anderson, Hunter, Fatukauzi, Khalil Davis, Tim Settle. Right, you got some guys that are good rotational players outside of Hunter and Anderson. You still got to look at that interior D-line position and address that. You still need a cornerback, right? You still need a safety with $19 million left on your salary cap at the time of this recording. You can't go into next season with Jimmy Ward and Jalen Petrie as your safety, which led to the number 26, 27 overall passing defense. They were a huge part of that. So sending over 2 second rounders for a receiver that, as good as he is, as great as he's been for Josh Allen, we are starting to see. I mean, Stephon Diggs is not necessarily the deep threat that he once was.
Yeah, maybe is he a little washed? All right, fair enough.
Yeah, so not two, maybe one of those for Houston. Maybe you send over the 59th overall pick and use the 42nd over a player that you really like and you thought would be available between 23 and 42. Then you draft that player, and then now you go into the 3rd round looking at other needs that you need to address. But I do think for Houston, securing that second round pick was good for them to maybe dangle over teams and say, hey, that receiver on your roster that you may want to get rid of, or he's disgruntled. T. Higgins is a name I throw out there. Diggs, Ayuk is a name I throw out there, right? Like just maybe disgruntled guys that want to move on from their situation, want to be in a better situation for their families. We got a 2nd rounder for you. And I think that's why we saw them, get that back and then get one for next year.
Yep.
So
You'd be in the same
overall
spot
for
next year, but
Houston,
with your first.
right, and that's huge for Houston. They got 2 second rounds for next year. Overall for Houston, I think that they did a couple of things, right? Just they saw
Yeah.
players in that draft pool that they thought would be available at 42 that they really do like, regardless of their position. And I would really like T Sweat from UT here in Houston. Um, they also saw an opportunity to contractually, financially avoid paying first round tender to a rookie on their contract. They also saw an opportunity to say, hey, well, we got a second rounder for a receiver out there that can come in and help our offense because they can't go into next season with the same receiver core. That would be completely irresponsible and malpractice on behalf of Nick Caserio.
Got it. How about free agent? The Texans can do the Vikings one last favor. They can go out and sign free agent wide receiver 3 type KJ Osborne,
I would
somebody to
love
fill
it.
out the room, right?
Would love it.
Give him more than, I think it has to be like $3 million a year, which he'll probably get more than that. And that affects the Vikings compensatory pick situation such that they get a third rounder for Danielle Hunter, which is currently canceled out.
How many favors y'all want Houston to do for y'all?
Just one more. Just one more.
That's a lot of favors.
One more.
And
That's
then,
it.
so we y'all got Blake Cashman. We didn't necessarily get anything for Blake Cashman.
You got a comp pick.
Okay. All right.
So there's that.
All right.
We'll get out of here. You can find Locked On Texans and Locked On Vikings wherever you find your favorite shows. Check out Locked On Sports today. You can find a 24/7 streaming channel. Nothing else like it on the internet. So go ahead and flip that thing on and forget about it. We have Twitter Tuesday tomorrow. So get your questions in. I'm sure you have a million of them. You can send them to me at lockedonvikingspodcast@gmail.com. You can also fill out a Google form, which is linked in the show notes to any show or the description on YouTube. You can also hit me with questions on Twitter. I'll put out a call on Monday morning. I will see you guys all for that. And as always, Skull.